use those kinds of chemicals and other pesticides in the United States. Job's not over because there's been an exit created or escape hatch for the pesticide producers. They continue to produce these banned, restricted pesticides in our communities inside the United States, and they do this for foreign export.
Limited data from EPA in 2013 revealed that banned, restricted, and unregistered pesticides are manufactured in 23 states for export only. EPA doesn't track the volume or final destination of these pesticides, which are then applied to crops like coffee, tea, cotton, fruit and vegetables, and may indeed be imported back to the United States as pesticide residues on these foods. The FDA only inspects 2% of imported produce, so the true risk to the United States consumer is unknown.
There's a contradiction here because I think when you look at nuclear technology, we're very careful in how we export that technology. But, I think one of the major concerns we've got to admit is that we worry that an abuse of that technology or misuse of that technology will come back to hurt the United States in some way or another. We need to have that same attitude with pesticides.
When I step back and really think about the scope of what we've done, it's been a giant, terrible, tragic experiment. It goes way beyond pesticides, to asbestos, lead paint, to flame retardants, to all kinds of products, drugs, pharmaceuticals that were not properly studied and cleared for safety before we turned them into products. All those products and all that export and all the damage that's been done for decades, the first politician that really took notice of this was President Jimmy Carter.
When I was getting ready to leave Made in America, ready to mean something. As soon as I left office, they descended on President Reagan, Ronald Reagan, and he agreed to continue selling pesticides and flammable clothing and unproved or disproved drugs or condemned items to people overseas just so that the manufacturers could get rid of them and not take a big loss. More than 30 years after I left the White House, the issue is still unresolved. And I would say that at this point, the power and influence of unscrupulous companies and their lobbyists is even more powerful than it was when I was in the White House.
When we speak of the circle of poison, we most often think of the danger to American consumers. We think of foreign-grown food, some scarcely inspected by the FDA, U.S. borders, food tainted with U.S.-made pesticides that EPA considers cancer-causing and too dangerous for domestic farm use. Today, chemical companies still export tons of pesticides that EPA considered too dangerous for our farmers to use. Yet EPA cannot tell us how many of these made in the U.S. unregistered pesticides are currently being exported.
Senator Leahy was the first elected official after President Carter who tried to stop the circle of poison by introducing 3 bills in the 1990s.
Well, when I first introduced it, we had a lot of pushback by lobbyists in the Senate. We had enough people in the Senate who realized it was important to stop this circle of poison, and we passed it. But once it got to the House of Representatives, the lobbyists were able to work a lot harder, and they were able to stop it from being in the final bill. We tried mightily. We worked on Saturdays and weekends, everything else on the bill, but could not get that part through.
The Fisher of the EPA also opposed the circle of poison bill.
So take the case of Linda Fisher. She was an EPA official who argued against the circle of poison bill during the first Bush administration. After that, she went to work for Monsanto, actually, as a lobbyist. After that, she went back into government, back as a high official of the EPA in the second Bush administration. And since then, she's become a high official at DuPont. It's a perfect example of how the revolving door of officials moving in and out of government, regulating pesticides and other toxics, and then going to work for the people that produce them.
In 2012, the top 6 pesticide companies hired 116 lobbyists. 112 of them were either former members of Congress or former members of a major government agency like the EPA, the FDA, the USDA. 116 lobbyists, 112 either former members of Congress or people who used to work at our federal agencies. And so, since 2004, the big 6 pesticide companies have spent almost $220 million in lobbying just the federal government. Just the federal government. That doesn't even include the states. And what makes that so much more effective, of course, is that they're using former members of Congress, former chairs of the ag committees, former major players at the EPA, the USDA, as their lobbyists. And what makes it ironic is that many of these people, before they became congressmen, or before they came to the government, actually worked for these very same companies.
6 are the 6 agrochemical companies that control upwards of 75% of the global pesticide trade. And the big 6 by name are Monsanto, Dow, Bayer, Syngenta, DuPont, and BASF. And those 6 global corporations really control the terms of food and farming